Hi, Jeremy. How are you? Good evening to you.
Oh, hello,
Yeah.
Jeff. A good evening to you, and a good evening to all our viewers tonight. So, how are you doing?
Yes. I'm doing great. Well, we had a show earlier, and we are
Yeah,
back again tonight. And I'm always excited to, to talk to our guests. How about you?
okay.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm pretty good myself, Jeff, and I'm really excited for tonight's show because again, it's something that piques my interest. And
Okay.
what is our topic again for tonight?
It's UDL,
UDL.
Universal, yeah, Design for Learning, and we will just let our guest what tell us about what it is, what we can learn from this. How can we be better teachers using this? How can our students benefit from this? And our guest is also an author. Okay,
An author.
she has written a couple of books already. Uh, she's also an associate professor. Okay, a director of graduate teacher education at Stonehill College in Massachusetts, and the college has been in operations for more than like 70 years. It's
Wow.
started since the 40s. Yes. Let's not let everyone wait. Let's call in our guest, Dr. Elizabeth Keefe. Good evening to you.
Good morning, actually.
Oh yeah, good morning
Hi.
there, and
Good
good evening
morning.
here.
Uh,
Yeah, it's
Good morning to you, and good evening to us.
Yes, good evening
yes.
to you.
I like guesting people from other places. You know, it's nice because we get to learn a lot of things. We get to exchange ideas. We get to inject interesting discussions to
Yeah,
this interview, right? And
Absolutely.
of course, our viewers get to listen to what we talk about, and then they get to bring home a lot of things which they can bring
exactly.
to their classroom, right? So
Exactly, Jeff. And Dr. Elizabeth, thank you for doing this. Again, for our viewers, it's going to be a multifaceted as well as a multicultural approach, right? However, when it comes to your
exactly.
topic, it's not multi, but rather universal.
Oh
So,
yes.
Thank you
okay,
for having me.
All right.
okay.
You're welcome, and it's our honor, Dr. Kiev. Anyway, before we start, I just like to greet a few people who are watching us right now. Cassiopeia saying good evening to everyone. Charity, yes, Rosel, Leilani, Lynn, and Jemobel, and all the others watching us right now. Good evening to you. If you do have questions along the way, just type in
Type
your
it down.
message. Yeah, just type in your question. Someone's saying good evening to Dr. Kif. Jamie saying good evening to Dr.
Hi,
Kif.
Jamie.
Good morning. She said good morning. Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
correct. All right. So, okay. Dr. Kif, please tell us a bit more about yourself.
Sure. I'm a teacher, educator, and researcher at Stonehill College, where, as you said, I'm an associate professor and I serve as the director of graduate teacher education. It's been a really great year for me at Stonehill because it's the first year of our brand new graduate program. And we're building it really with an identity of inclusivity, which is a great way to think about UDL as well. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. The majority of the research that I do is focused on special education access and teacher preparation and teacher education. So my work has really focused on how do we best prepare teachers for different contexts, particularly where diverse students are creating access. And then I've done some work on the policy level as well and on a regional or national scope. So I really enjoy the work that I do. I'm a former classroom teacher myself. So I think that that's really important part of like preparing other teachers is having them have the confidence in me that I've been in the classroom. I really understand the demands and the pressures that are on teachers to, meet curricular standards and develop assessment that is authentic and reach all learners. So
Yeah, when
Okay.
you were still active in the classroom, what age level or what grade level did you handle?
So when I was teaching, I actually taught autistic children, and I did that in both private and public settings. I was an early childhood special educator, but since I left the classroom, I've committed to being in schools at least once a week. So I left the classroom almost 20 years ago, and I have been committed to being in public schools. So I work at all ages now. So I will consult with schools, go into classrooms, support teachers, or help public schools build an identity of inclusion in their own buildings or in particular programs or classes.
All right. Okay. Jeremy, you were saying something earlier. Did
Uh,
I miss your question? Yeah.
oh no. So
Oh,
okay, maybe we could start with introducing what the topic is for
yes.
this morning and tonight. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So, so the topic is universal design for learning to
Yeah.
support students' remote and virtual learning. All right. So maybe you can explain what UDL is first.
Sure. So universal design for learning is it's a theory about the approach to learning that helps to incorporate all different kinds of learners. So our standard approach to education and teaching has been characterized in some places as we aim to the middle, and then we exclude some kids that are on the fray, on the margins. And the theory of universal design for learning is actually borrowed from architecture. And the idea is that you design from the beginning of learning, from the design stage, you design something that's accessible to as many people as possible. So I'll use an architecture analogy. Here in the United States, after the World Wars, we had many veterans returning that were injured and that were now wheelchair users, or who had different mobility. And at the same time, we also had advances in science and medicine that helped people to live longer. So we had more elderly people with different mobility issues. And what this presented was a challenge to the existing buildings that we had. So we had buildings that did not have ramps or elevators in them. They did not have access for people who had mobility issues. So the design, universal design for learning, is borrowed from the concept that was adopted to think about how to improve access to public spaces. So we have, do you have the curb cut where you are? So the curb cut is a little ramp that goes down into the road,
yeah.
right? The curb cut is a really excellent example of how architecture and advances in accessibility has helped us think about that for the classroom. So the curb cut was designed for originally wheelchair users, but it's really good for everyone, right? It's designed to help a chair or somebody with mobility get down and not have to step down off of the curb. But it's also good for people who have just had knee surgery, for little kids, for people that are bicycle riders, people who are riding skateboards, right? It's essential for some, good for all. And we took that concept and we molded it into an educational concept, and it's a really excellent one. So it encourages teachers to think about how, from the very beginning of your design of learning, of your design of teaching a particular content area or lesson, do you think about making it accessible to as many people as possible? And when we do it that way, it's actually better for teachers as well, because it saves them the time that they would have to retrospectively make the learning accessible for the learners that weren't able to get it in the first iteration. So it saves teachers time, and it's also good for students.
Oh, okay. So, what are the tools in UDL?
So there are three principles of UDL, which are how we think about its implementation and how we think about its enactment. And they are engagement, representation, and action and expression. And so we think about these things in sort of three different categories. But the people that where the thought leaders around UDL say that you want to think of them not from like top down, like this is how you implement something, but you want to think about them across. So engagement is about recruiting the interest of the learner and what you do to get them excited and motivated to learn as the educator. And representation is about the ways that you represent the content so that it's accessible to a variety of learners, in that they might, for example, they might not learn visually, or they might learn with a combination of visual and auditory learning, or they might be somebody that learns in a hands-on environment. So representation suggests to the educator that they should be thinking about how do you represent in different ways all of the learning that's going to happen, so that it's not just one way for learners. They can access it in multiple ways. And action and expression is how we allow the learners to show what they know. So these are the different ways that, instead of requiring students to show us in one way through a test or a particular product, that we allow them to align what they know with their particular learner strengths. And so this kind of system opens up opportunities in the classroom. And the same concept around essential for some, good for many is very much true when you think about UDL as it's applied to learning. Because some of the things that I just talked about, recruiting interest, representation of content in multiple ways, and action and expression in ways that align with the strengths of the learner, are necessary for some of our diverse learners to meet the curricular demands of the classroom. But they are good for all of the learners in the classroom. It helps to avoid monotony. It helps to, recruit the interest of people, students that might not necessarily have tried something. So it helps learners to take risks, and it helps the teacher in that it's much more proactive model.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That's really interesting. So my question is UDL being utilized all throughout the U.S.?
That's a really excellent question. I would say that it's being utilized by many teachers in many places, and certainly there's been a big push to think about the use of UDL as we've moved to virtual and online environments. We have a national center for UDL and its implementation, so we have a lot of focus on it at the national level. And in many states, they've adopted aspects of UDL as a way to support teacher preparation and the ways that teachers are prepared. So I would say that it's widely used. It certainly has been a consideration as teachers have moved, from being forced suddenly in online environments to thinking about how do you deliver virtual instruction so that it's designed for all. Because we certainly know that, reaching teachers is a challenge in the remote and virtual environment. It reaching students rather. It's just not as simple as having everyone in front of you and figuring out how do you, recruit the interest of students that are scattered all over when you're teaching is a really big challenge. So we've been trying to help leverage UDL in those conversations as well.
Okay. So since we've been doing, sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've been transitioning also here in our country. We have been transitioning from physical classes to online classes. And it seems like we are all still in our early years of online teaching and online learning. So when it comes to UDL, what are and also online learning and teaching, so what are the competencies of teachers? What should the competences be of teachers who are teaching online? And what are the needs of online learners?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And it's something I think that took everyone that had to move suddenly to virtual environments by surprise. I think we don't right now have really good conceptions of the competencies that teachers need to deliver instruction online, but it's certainly forced us into thinking about that more broadly. I think the worldwide pandemic has signaled to us that we have to prepare teachers in different ways than we have previously. And, for the preparation for virtual and remote learning environments is certainly one thing that will have to be incorporated into the training of teachers in the future. I think we know that we can expect some future disruption with regard to this virus, and likely in the future with other viruses as well, or other events that cause us to move to virtual and remote environments. So the goal would be that you prepare a teacher that can move seamlessly between these environments. They have enough confidence to deliver instruction in those ways. I think to figure out that level of confidence, you have to know, what does good teaching look like in virtual and remote environments? And so I think that that's something that we're figuring out right now. And I was very interested, especially as a teacher educator, and if I am going to, for example, have my teachers who are being prepared go out and do their practice teaching in a virtual environment, I need to know what good teaching looks like so I can properly evaluate whether or not they're ready, right? So one thing that I've done is gather together a group of colleagues, and we meet weekly and talk about exactly your question. What are the competencies of good online, virtual, remote instruction? These are educators from all over the state. My state is Massachusetts, and there are a variety of different university professors and teachers, and we are trying to identify those teaching competencies that teachers will need. And so I don't think we have a straight answer yet, but the project is called Project Solve, and that's strategies and opportunities for leading virtual education. And we hope that by the end of our work, we're going to have some products to share with our colleagues about what we think those competencies.
Best practices.
Yeah.
I love the acronym
Wow.
there. Solve.
Thank you. I really like it too. I worked a long time to make it like powerful.
Yeah. No. Earlier, I interviewed someone. Well, the way they're doing it is they have what they call their ABC days. So A would be the lecture, whether synchronous or asynchronous, and B and C days would be like the seat work days, wherein the teacher is live, and then students get to interact. But this is more for older students. They're in the high school students already. Yeah. Well, I just remembered when Jeremy asked about different skills.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's my question about UDL. You mentioned about the principles, right? Like engagement. So the goal of UDL, the principal engagement, is to make sure an activity is designed in such a way that everyone is engaged.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say there's a teacher there's one teacher handling two sections. So therefore, the two sections will have different profiles. Section A will have a different profile with Section B.
Yeah.
Does that mean the teacher will have to create two different sets of activities so that it's designed to make sure everyone is engaged based on skills of the students there?
That's a good question. I think that theoretically, by leveraging universal design, you could avoid creating multiple sets of implementation of a particular content area. So if you design it well and you're thinking about ways for students to access, the idea behind UDL is not necessarily that it's individualized education, but that it's providing access that students wouldn't normally have if we were delivering instruction in a traditional sense. So I'll give you an example.
Yes.
If you were assigning a literacy assignment, for example, and traditionally we might say to students, all right, we're gonna read this book together, and to gauge your comprehension, I'm gonna have you write an essay that tells me the main points of what we just read. In a UDL design, we might, have students either access the book by reading it silently or listening to it on audio. And those options would be available for any learner, right? And that would be the engagement part. So the engagement is like, here are a variety of options to recruit your interest about this story, right? We might also have them engage in, some research about the story, like who wrote this story, what's the context of this story, and then to assess them, which is the product, the evidence that they've met the objectives. If the objective in that particular lesson is you want to know that the learner can extrapolate the salient points of the text, and you've previously assessed that with an essay, you could also allow students the option to create a short retelling of the story that they do in a group, or do an audio representation of the salient points of the text. So that you could also, just as a very simple measure, and instead of having students handwrite, they could do, access a digital version of it, right? So turn it in digitally, right? So there's a variety of layers of access that you've built into the lesson, but you've maintained the integrity of the objective. The objective being, you read the text, you tell me what it's about, but now you've just opened up the ways that you're engaging learners, the ways that you're representing the content, and the ways that they're allowed to show you what they know about it.
Oh, okay. It's clear now. So, so different ways of approaching an objective, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. So, Jeremy, that is something that we can include in what we do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
By the way, I just want to ask the audience: is UDL being practiced here? Right?
Yeah.
What a great question.
Good question. Yeah. So to all the audience watching right now, are you using UDL right now, or still having? So it's like having one instruction, one way of doing things, right? I mean, that is non-UDL, but in UDL there's one objective, but multiple ways of getting to the end goal.
Yes, and I think a lot of teachers are probably practicing it without realizing that they're doing that. So sometimes we're doing things that are, they embrace really good teaching, but we're not sure, that it fits into a particular category, or it's a theory. So sometimes it's just really good practice on the part of teachers.
Oh, okay, great. So are there any tools? Okay, you gave us like the principles. But are there different tools within the principles that will help them implement UDL?
Right. So that's a really good question. A lot of people feel frustrated by the answer to this question because it's not a specific set of tools or technologies. But how you want to think about it is, how do these tools support the three principles? So for example, when I've taught so I've been doing this series of weekly webinars for teachers because I recognized that, when we moved to the online environment, I had 15 years experience teaching online. So I felt fine. I just moved right over and I kept my class going, right? But I knew that a lot of teachers would be struggling with how to reach their learners. So I started this series of weekly webinars where I would just demonstrate some principles and some strategies for teachers to use, right? So in the online environment in particular, I think leveraging UDL will require specific tools. So in that context, there are things that you can use, and many people use Chrome environments. Do you guys use Chrome environments there? It's like
Google?
The Google Suite, right? Yeah. So there are these great extensions that really help to leverage UDL principles in implementation. So for example, if you're offering students in the virtual environment, a worksheet that they have to read and respond to, there are UDL tools out there that will read it out loud. And that, if you layer that into your instruction, then you are creating this UDL environment. So yeah, it's not tools necessarily. It's just how you leverage those tools to adopt and apply the principles, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff, do you have any extensions in Chrome? I'm kind of
Uh,
scared to use some of the extensions, but anyway.
I
uh,
love the Chrome extensions. There's so many that are amazing. You got to try them.
we have to try it, Jeremy.
Yeah,
We
we have
have to
to try.
find out how we can leverage those extensions there.
Yeah.
We have a comment here from Cassiopeia. Let's just read this first. I think this is a very special program because this kind of learning gives equal opportunity to learners. Yeah.
Yes, that is absolutely true. Um, I think it's one of the things that it helps any group of diverse students. So in the United States, we have categories of students that are, they're diverse because of race or culture or gender or ability or language, right?
Right.
And UDL helps to reach a variety of learners. So we're not othering, these different groups like, oh, well, this group gets that and this group gets that. It helps a teacher to think about how do you design instruction so that everyone can participate. And that is really where the concept of inclusivity comes in that I talked about. UDL is very much grounded in the idea that we should be inclusive of all different populations and all different learners.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe what we're doing right now is something that UDL like thing. Well, when we're broadcasting something like this, and we invite teachers to join the conversation.
Yes. And if
Right.
you
So
if you added captions to this, like if you're captioning it, that's like UDL accessibility. So if you're providing like a transcript, so different ways for people to access the information that you're offering.
all right, that was your cat moving there. All right, all right. We have a guest there. Okay.
I love
So
an
yeah.
animal Zoom bomb. It's very you got to have an animal like
Yeah,
We
Google Classroom. Well,
yeah.
we use a different LMS. That's
Yeah.
why
They
we
use
use
Canvas.
Canvas. Yeah.
yeah.
So you have one here from Cassiopeia. Google Classroom is now being used for new trend in learning.
Yeah.
We have Charity Garcia. Google Classroom is what I use now for my graduate class. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's into Google Class right now. In fact, next month we'll be giving a program on Google Class. So let's go to the author side of Dr. Keefe. Okay.
Yeah.
She has like a couple or 3 books you've written already.
2 books.
Okay.
And they are both pretty relevant to our conversation today. The first one is Remixing the Curriculum, and that's the teacher's guide to digital technology in the classroom. And that book really does provide a ton of strategies. It uses UDL as a grounding framework for the book. So it's divided into sections where it asks the teacher to think about engagement or representation and action and expression. And it provides specific tools that can be leveraged for each of those areas. So, we will give a recommendation for, how do you think about the flipped classroom, or how do you think about the use of gaming in learning? And we cover, my co-author and I, we developed our own framework, which is called the X framework. And we ask teachers to think about, proactive teaching, assistive technology, UDL, and then something we call technology fitness, which actually asks the educator to leverage their confidence in the use of technology in developing skills in those other areas. And what we say about good teaching is that it's at the intersection of all of those things. It's at where the X is. And so that book, it was actually born from, our work in classrooms and in schools, and we were really encouraged by teachers to share our knowledge about it. Mm-hmm. So that was my first one. And then my second one is a co-authored book as well called Reclaiming Accountability in Teacher Education. And it's a book about policy in the United States.
Let's talk more about that accountability.
Sure.
That's a topic Jeremy and I love discussing in our corporate training. So
Yeah.
all about accountability. Share
Accountability.
some, yeah,
Okay.
accountability. Share something about that book on accountability for teachers.
So the part of the concept behind that book is the idea that accountability has become a dirty word. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
a word that is like it's either a magic word to some people or a dirty word, right?
Okay.
And what we suggest about accountability is this powerful reclaiming of it, where it's not something that is, it's not put on to you. It's something that you reclaim and you say, like, how do I be accountable for what I should be doing? And we specifically focus, of course, on teacher education. So we talk about some ed reform strategies that have been happening in the United States and ways that accountability has either succeeded or it's failed. And we offer ways to think about it. And so our solution and our suggestion as a result of the book is democratic accountability. And the idea that you leverage democracy in thinking about, which raises the voices of the constituents in the situation, you leverage democracy to enact more accountability.
Okay. So you mentioned something about accountability being a good word and a dirty word. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanna know more about it. I mean, I'm curious about why did it come out in the book? Well, yeah.
So, in the United States, we have a ton of different ed reforms. And I would say here, teachers are one of the most critiqued professions, right? That is true.
Yes.
And partly it's because everybody has an opinion about education. It runs very deep with people because of their own either personal experiences, whether they're good or bad,
Everyone. Yeah.
right? And so everyone has an opinion, therefore educators are under the excoriating lens of critics who say, you're doing a bad job, you're doing a good job, you are the problem and you're the solution, right? So in the United States, our ed reform movement has suggested that, it's teachers' failure to deliver good instruction that results in poor test scores, for example, right?
Okay.
And then that accountability idea moved to teacher educators like me that said, well, if teachers are doing a bad job, they must be being prepared poorly. So now it's teacher educators that are in the hot seat, right? So the idea with reclaiming accountability and part of it being a dirty word is, I don't think anybody would argue with the idea that we need to be accountable for our work, right? Everybody wants students to succeed. I think where we diverge is where in what causes failure on students' parts. And there are two different sides to this. There's the ed reform side, which says it's poor teaching, and then there's the social side, which says we don't have the conditions, the structures, and the accessibility to create the conditions for learners to be successful. And how do we solve those things? I think our book and our approach is, it's neither a dirty word or a magic word. We've got to meet somewhere in the middle, right? To think about, we have to marry these two sides. And I frequently say, if you want to make progress, you have to get dirty with the people that disagree with you. You got to roll up your sleeves and say, all right, let's get into this. Because if we just shout at each other from, different sides of the issue, we never move it forward.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. So here in our exchanges, in our email exchanges, you mentioned something about you want to create or educators can capitalize on skills and strategies they use in the classroom to create equitable access, okay, and support students' virtual learning with the right support and design. Well, in our previous interviews, we talked about equity.
Yeah.
Right,
Equality
Jeremy?
and equity.
Equality and equity.
Yeah.
So, is this is equity an effect or a product of UDL?
Absolutely, it is. And I think the other thing that this coronavirus and the worldwide pandemic has done is put on full display our shortcomings in education, right? We know, there's no way to hide it in this environment. We know there's really inequitable conditions for students. So yes, in the delivery of instruction, UDL absolutely has equity as a goal. And so this is a way to leverage how you create more opportunities for more students to be accessing the content and the learning as it's happening. It doesn't address the base level equity issues that we have. Like, okay, well, at the very base level, you have to start thinking about, do students have a computer at home? Do they have Wi-Fi access or internet access, right? Those things UDL can't address, but when you get to the conditions of the design of learning, it absolutely embraces equity as one of its goals.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
So, by the way, Doc, let's say the conditions are ideal for everyone, right? For the teacher, for the student.
Yeah.
How do you maintain the integrity? How do you engage the students? Because that's one of the principles of UDL, right? It's about the engagement. So when it comes to teaching, learning activities, let's say, or assessment tests, how do you make it more equitable, I guess, for everyone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that the idea of UDL is to figure out how, okay, you have this group of learners, and especially in the virtual environment. And by the way, I would like to live in ideal conditions. So wherever that is, please direct. Once you have the conditions that you need, and I think that teachers will always be working to create those conditions. That's one thing to think about. Our contexts change, our conditions change in our society. So that's something that's frequently shifting. So on the side of teacher preparation, one of the responsibilities we have is to be preparing teachers to be able to shift, pivot, and change as a way to make learning equitable and accessible, as you said. I think when we have teachers that are able, that they have the skills that they need, and they don't have what I call technical skills, only technical skills. So there are some theories about training educators that say, you just do these things and you'll be fine. And I argue that if you just boil teaching down to technical activities where they're implementing something or they're doing a specific thing, that when the context changes or the conditions changes like they have right now, in the world, teachers are left with very few moves. They don't have anything to move on to. So I argue that in teacher preparation, we have to be preparing teachers for complex environments. So not technical, but keeping teaching complex. And that's, how do you create or develop a teacher that can think, pivot, and leverage, different strategies. So ideally what you would do is you would prepare a teacher so that if there was, if there was an unexpected event like we had, they would be able to figure out, because they're a critical thinker, how do I move forward? How do I create access and equity in this environment?
I like that, Jeremy. Well, I think not just for teachers, but for everyone. Everyone should be taught how to think, pivot, and leverage whatever the resources are out there for them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as simple as the Google Chrome, Jeremy, we have to leverage on those extensions.
That's right. I'm going to send you a list.
Yes, please. Yeah. For those who are watching us right now, okay, I hope you heard those three important words. Learn to think, okay? Learn to pivot, because environment always changes. We live in a, what do you call this? VUCA world. VUCA world, right? Volatile, ambiguous. What's C, Jeremy?
Volatile, ambiguous, complex, and
no,
uncertain.
not, that's
VUCA.
VUCA. Yeah. Okay.
Volatile,
Because
I like
complex, and ambiguous world.
Yes, that's correct. So, so since we live in a VUCA world, we have to learn to think, pivot, and at the same time leverage on the resources. And I think for me, the last one, leveraging, is what will bring you to the next phase.
Yeah.
Okay. from understanding the environment, being able to think, because leveraging is really the active part. That is when you take action. That is when you put things to your advantage. So yeah, to all the listeners, do remember those three important words. Not just for teachers, I think, but for
I agree.
everyone,
Yeah, I
right?
agree. Yeah.
So you have to incorporate that, Jeremy,
Yeah.
uh, when you teach your students. Anyway, I guess for my last question, um, how as a teacher, how do you know if you are successful in implementing UDL?
It's a great question. I think you know because you are doing less work to help students that haven't gotten it in the in the first iteration of your teaching. I think in traditional models, I think even today, teachers are still being prepared in some ways to think about I do this for most students, and then I'll do this other thing for some students, right? When
Yeah.
you design UDL effectively, you have to do less of that. You can think about providing access at the design level, like the curb cut or like an elevator in a building, right? If learning is accessible, you are doing less work after the fact.
Okay, great. So I like that. Less work for you. That
Yeah.
means truly, for a start, you really need to know the capabilities of your students and
Yeah.
how they learn, right?
Yeah. And I
That's the
think
first step.
sometimes there are surprises about that too. The motto, essential for some, good for many, is, um, a thing that it'll take a teacher by surprise. Sometimes they'll see a student, accessing or taking a risk to try something that they might not otherwise have done. So I think that there are also surprises along the way when you implement UDL.
Yeah. Uh, well, I remember speaking to a college, not from our school, Jeremy, a college lecturer who told me that he is already happy when the 10% of his class is already engaged. I hope he's watching this. So we should aim for like 100% engagement,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We want more engagement than 10%.
Yeah, okay. So we should not be happy with the 10%. I hope you're watching this one. All right, Jeremy, last any questions from you?
Well, yeah, the same as you, Jeff. That's what I've been told. We have been giving a lot of workshops, right, Jeff, together
Yeah.
to our clients as well as I'm teaching in the academe. And also, I've been getting that 10%. That's good enough, right? So, so my realization for tonight is that, hey, I should aim for 100%, right? No matter
Yeah.
how hard it really is my accountability to my students,
Yeah.
right? That I should be giving everything, and they should also be getting what they need to get out of the learning,
I think
right?
also that what happens is when you effectively engage your students, they start helping you to do the work because they become involved in and they own some accountability for moving the learning forward as well. They feel ownership of their learning. So engagement is a really important concept because if you haven't engaged your students, doing all the other work is such torture. You're just working against the
Right.
grind all the time. But if you can engage them, they take ownership and you move the learning forward together as a community.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
that yeah.
as a follow up question, I guess I'm just curious. Okay, so how do you? I mean, I've seen students from like what 4 to 40 or 60. Okay, some aren't really engaged in the sense that they don't participate in the activities.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we aiming for, let's say you have a class of like 30 or 50 or 30 or 35?
Yeah.
Do we aim at 100% interaction with the activity, given that there are already choices of the approaches that they can do?
Right. So it's a good question, and it's not necessarily that it's individualized for every learner, but you want to aim for a situation where you've designed the learning effectively, that everyone can participate in at least some part of what's happening. Right. So you want to be thinking about, all right, and I want to say and make sure that I say that universal design for learning, while it will bring a lot of diverse learners into the context of the learning community, you still might need to do extra things in terms of, you know, students with language differences or special education students, but you will have built this foundational access that makes that part easier as well. The idea is really that you're providing opportunities for all of those students at different points in the learning to participate. So in that realm, you might get a learner that wasn't previously engaged at all to improve their engagement, and that would be a win.
Oh, great.
Yep,
So,
definitely it'd be a win.
Jeremy, we are now equipped.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So
Yeah.
let's just read some more greetings before we end the program. From Cassiopeia, this is a very nice approach to learning, since the teacher becomes innovative and responsive in the learning process. We are proactively responsive to the learners.
Yes.
Another one from Cassiopeia. Accountability goes with commitment to be true and walk with integrity. Oh, I love that.
Yes.
And from Jenny. Good evening. Whoa, I missed watching this show, and I'm just translating already and be here. All right. Any last words from you, Dr. Keefe, or any last tips on UDL?
I would say that moving to UDL is definitely a shift on the part of the educator, and it does require you to sort of stop in your tracks and think about how you might do something differently. And in that way, it's a little bit disruptive to the educator when they try to adopt UDL principles. But I think that in all of the educators I've worked with, when they start to really authentically implement UDL, they feel a much higher sense of agency about their work. And they feel like learning is much going much more smoothly. So, you know, I think that there are great resources out there for continuing to learn about UDL, and I would recommend. In the United States, we have an organization called CAST, and they're really the thought leaders about UDL, and that's the Center for Applied Special Technology. So they have a ton of resources online. They've written a couple of great books as well. My book is a great start for teachers that want to try a couple of things and think about, you know, where can I dip my toe into the water with technology? So some good resources. And also I'm on social media and I frequently post resources, so people can find me. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Prof. Keefe. So, you know, I think social media is another great platform for people to find resources.
Let me just follow you now
Great.
in Instagram, okay? That's Prof. Keefe, right?
Yes.
So,
Prof. Keefe.
I'll post it one moment, okay? Let me post that so everyone can see that. That's PROF KEEFE, right?
Yep. At Prof. Keefe. Correct.
At Prof. Keefe. So everyone watching right now, do add Dr. Keefe. That's her Instagram handle, right?
Yes.
That's correct. Okay.
Yeah.
So you also post your videos. You mentioned earlier that you do post videos. Do you post it here?
So I snippets of videos here, and I'm planning a webinar series for the fall, definitely, where I'll be posting videos on a YouTube channel. So there'll be
great.
short videos that you know, that help educators. And I work with an organization. I'm president of an organization in Massachusetts that's a professional organization for educators called the Massachusetts Council for Exceptional Children, and we do something called the MCEC Minute. And that's a 1-minute resource for educators that we release every single week. And so it's a YouTube video and you can find it by, I tweet about it a lot, so they can find it on my social media, or you can look for MCEC on YouTube.
So that's MCEC on YouTube,
Yep.
and make sure you follow Dr. Keefe. Jeremy, right after this, so let's follow Dr.
Yeah,
Keefe. All right.
definitely.
So here are more. Here are some more. Wow. Comments and greetings from the audience. Okay, let's read this one. UDL is being sensible and sensitive to the learners. No student left behind.
Yep, absolutely.
I have been motivated to do more than what I am doing now. Oh,
Yay!
wow. Great. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Dr. Kiff. Just imagine that one in just under an hour with
Excellent. Good work,
motivated
Courtney.
people. Yeah. Jennifer, when teacher is effective, learners become productive.
Absolutely.
All right. From Charity again, 10% of engagement from our learners is not enough, but must goal to reach for 100%.
Yes.
Definitely.
Get out there.
Okay. All right. Great. Here's Jenny. Shirley will follow. Yes, and of course, our dear friend Doan here. I am foreseeing that correcting mistakes and giving points for improvement will be more challenging in the synchronous setup. Okay. More specific tips, please, especially for bigger classes, 30 students. As what Jeff mentioned, if possible. Thank you. Oh,
Yeah.
she's asking for tips for bigger
Yeah.
bigger class size.
Now, so I will say that evaluating learners in a large platform environment is definitely challenging, but there are also ways that it's hard to talk in generalities because you have to really talk about the way that you're assigning learning. But some of the Chrome extensions I mentioned, I'll use an example of an excellent tool called CAMI, KAMI.app. And that is a tool, it works in concert with Google Classroom, for example. And it has so many capabilities, and there are pro versions and free versions. I think the free version is a great place for educators to start. They can, they can annotate a document. They can make a video that talks about a document. So, for example, where I talked earlier about using a text and showing your comprehension, they can take that document, click a button, create a video, and deliver it to the teacher's Google Classroom. And so you then have, a living evidence of how your students have met your objectives. The idea is really thinking about how do you collect the data and the evidence in virtual environments for those large groups. And that's one tool to help do it.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I just went to their website, and CAMI app looks interesting. So, if for those watching right now,
Sounds familiar, Jeff.
CAMI app.
Yeah.
Or maybe you've seen it before.
Yeah. Give it a try.
Yeah. Few more greetings. Okay. Here. Thanks for this informative and engaging seminar interview. God bless. What's that YouTube channel again?
So it's Massachusetts Council for Exceptional Children, MCEC, and
MCEC.
I can send you the link, Jeff, if
okay, and I'll post it here.
Yeah.
So Jenny, that's MCEC in YouTube. Okay.
You can. I think if you Google me, I come up because I do some of them. So some people have found it that way.
Yeah. All right. So, but if they follow you in IG, for sure, you'll have a lot of information there on the videos, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Correct. Yeah.
So, all right, great. Jeremy, before we end, as always, we tell the people what we got tonight. So, what did you get?
Maybe we could start with you. Now I'm just kidding. Just like what I mentioned earlier, again, it's all about UDL is really about making sure that what you are teaching reaches all the students, at least inspires them to take part. And of course, you have to make sure that you are competent enough and patient enough, of course, to deliver what you are delivering to your students.
Yeah, well, in my case, that's TPL. Think, pivot, and leverage.
Okay.
Right?
Very good.
So,
All right.
think, pivot, leverage, and let's add one more. Another L. Learn. All
And
right.
learn.
Uh, think, pivot, leverage, and learn. So you can always improve. So I love those. It's not just for that is an example of UDL, Universal Design lesson, because
Yeah.
it's applicable for everyone. Okay, not just for teachers, but for any even entrepreneurs can use those three words there. Think,
Yeah.
pivot, and leverage. All right.
Definitely,
So
Jeff. We do that.
yeah, we do that. We do
But,
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great job.
Yeah. Dr. Keefe, thank you very much for your time. It's such a
Thank you.
pleasure. It's an honor to have you in our program. By the way, if they want to get your book, can they check it out on your Instagram?
I will post it today, and I'll post a link to it. Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, here's another one. Before we end, letting kids make choices and giving them assignments that feel relevant to their lives. Yes, of course. They want to feel empowered, of course. Everyone wants to feel empowered.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Keefe, have a great
Morning.
Morning there?
Morning,
What was
day.
it?
I have the
Is
whole
it it's a Saturday, right?
It's Friday.
Oh, it's Friday. All
It's
right.
Friday.
Oh, okay.
Don't tell me what happens.
Okay. So
Remember,
okay.
remember, Jeff, my joke. We are from the future.
Oh yeah. We are in the
Yes.
future. You're right. All right. So Dr. Keefe, thank you. It's such we had so much fun interviewing you, guessing you tonight. We learned a lot. The viewers learned a lot. Thank you so much. All right.
Great.
Have a great Friday.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you.
It's great to be with you.
You're welcome.
Good.
All right. So that
Alright,
ends our program again. Yeah. So what else? That's it. All right.
Yeah, that's it.
So,
I guess we learned a
let's-
lot of things. I learned a lot of things. Our viewers learned a lot of things. That's a night for us.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.